Have you ever noticed this strange pattern? The more you chase someone, the more they pull away. But the moment you stop trying, when you finally give up, they come back. Suddenly interested, suddenly curious, suddenly wanting what they once dismissed. It feels like emotional whiplash. But what if it wasn't a coincidence? What if rejection isn't always what it seems? And what if your absence says more than your presence ever could? This isn't just a dating phenomenon. It's deeply psychological. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but grows in size." Rejection is never neutral. It provokes something buried deep within the unconscious. When you walk away, when you go silent, when you stop giving your energy, you create a void. And that void can trigger one of the most powerful forces in human psychology, projection. The person who rejected you, they're not thinking, "Oh good, they're gone." More often, they're wondering, why did they stop chasing? Did I make a mistake? Wait, do I even know how I feel anymore? Suddenly, you're not a person. They're evaluating you as a symbol, a reflection of their own doubts, their fear of being unwanted. And this shift can make you oddly desirable, especially if they've been relying on your attention to feel validated. Rejection doesn't just create distance. It creates curiosity. And curiosity, as every great storyteller knows, is the first seed of desire. But here's the twist. This only works when it's genuine. When you walk away just to manipulate someone into wanting you again, it backfires. Because people can sense pretense. They're not reacting to your silence. They're reacting to the emotional authenticity behind it. The real power lies in letting go, not to punish, but because you finally respect yourself enough to stop begging for crumbs. In that moment, you stop being the chaser and become the one who is missed. Why silence triggers desire and fear. Let's be honest, most people are not rejecting you. They're rejecting how you make them feel about themselves. If your presence forces someone to confront their emotional immaturity, their lack of clarity, their deep-seated insecurities, they'll pull away. Not because you're wrong for them, but because you make them feel too exposed. This is where Jung's concept of the shadow comes in. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When someone rejects you, it's often because you activated something uncomfortable in them, something they've spent years trying to avoid. Maybe you were too sincere, too emotionally available, too real in a world where people have been trained to hide, and your vulnerability became a mirror, one they weren't ready to look into. But when you step back, when you stop over-explaining, stop convincing, stop proving your worth, you force them to sit with that reflection. No distraction, no comfort, just silence. And that silence? It's deafening. Suddenly, their mind starts doing something it hasn't done before, projecting inward. Why do I feel uneasy without them? Why does their distance bother me? Was I really rejecting them, or just protecting myself? This is where rejection flips. Not because you became more attractive, but because they started facing their own shadows. And they associate that process with you, with your presence, with your absence, with the emotional awakening they never expected to feel. But beware, this awakening is fragile. It's not an invitation to rush back in and fix them. It's a moment of psychological space, where desire and clarity start to emerge from discomfort. If you interrupt it too soon, you pull them back into their old defenses. If you leave it alone, they might finally meet themselves, and by extension, meet you again, without fear. Projection isn't personal. It's psychological warfare. When someone pushes you away, especially without clear reason, it's tempting to internalize the blame. You think, "I wasn't enough. I scared them off. Maybe I loved them too soon, too deep, too much." But what if I told you? It had nothing to do with you? What you experienced wasn't personal rejection. It was psychological projection. Carl Jung described projection as the process of displacing one's own unconscious traits onto another person. In simpler terms, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting parts of themselves that you accidentally exposed. You see, when someone carries unresolved shame, trauma, or emotional confusion, they need someone to assign it to. Someone to wear the mask of their own darkness. Someone to blame. And if you happen to show up with realness, intensity, or emotional depth, you become the perfect canvas. They project their fear of abandonment onto your independence, their own lack of self-worth onto your confidence, their guilt onto your clarity, their confusion onto your calm. And suddenly, they're not seeing you anymore. They're seeing their childhood wounds, their unspoken grief, their buried shame. You've become a symbol, not a person. And that's why their reaction feels so extreme, so irrational, so emotionally charged. It's not about logic. It's about survival. Because if they accepted you, they'd have to accept everything you mirror back to them. And that requires maturity, a level of inner work that most people haven't even begun. So instead of saying, "Wow, you made me realize I still carry a father wound," they say, "You're too much. You're intense. I need space." But here's the shift. When you recognize projection for what it is, you stop playing defense. You don't shrink. You don't over-explain. You don't beg to be seen clearly. You simply step back and let their psyche unravel itself. Because once projection has no fuel, no reaction, no emotional supply, it collapses. And in that collapse, they're left with the one thing they were trying to avoid all along: themselves. Desire doesn't chase you when you speak. It chases you when you disappear. We're taught that if you want someone to love you, you have to show up. Explain yourself. Prove your worth. Be louder, more available, more visible. But Jung's work teaches us the opposite. True magnetism comes from the unknown. Why? Because the unconscious mind is far more powerful than the conscious one. When you disappear after rejection, without bitterness, without blame, you become a mystery, a symbol, a story they can't finish. And the human psyche hates unresolved stories. They expect you to break down, to beg, to send long messages explaining your pain, to prove that they still matter to you. When you don't, something strange happens in their subconscious. At first, they feel in control, relieved, even. Finally, they got the message. But then days pass, weeks, and instead of silence being peaceful, it becomes deafening. Why? Because in that silence, they're confronted with a terrifying thought. Did I misjudge them? Why aren't they chasing me? Did they actually see through me? Now you're not a rejected person anymore. You're a mirror they can't escape. And the more they try to erase you, the more you echo in their psyche. That's the power of non-response. It rewrites the narrative without words. You are no longer someone who was left behind. You are someone who saw through their act and vanished without needing revenge. That's what haunts them. Not your presence, but your absence. Not your tears, but your unshakable stillness. This is the ultimate alchemy of rejection. You become desirable not because you fought to stay, but because you refuse to fight at all. That's the lesson most people never learn. So the next time you're rejected, pause. Don't chase. Don't justify. Don't shrink. Just observe. Let the rejection become your mirror, not your master. And when you walk away, not in anger, but in quiet self-respect, you don't lose power. You reclaim it. Because the person who walks away silently is the person who gets remembered. If this message struck a chord with you, don't just keep it to yourself. Drop a comment, share your story, or send this to someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more videos like this, subscribe. We're just getting started.